Now, one of the misconceptions I think a lot of tech companies have is that the government just kind of gets in the way of good, technological innovation. Like if you have a limited government, like many libertarians believe, and you allow these companies to just invest, innovate through research and design, they will prosper, they will thrive, they will do well. But the thing is, they need governments. They need governments for a lot of things, like to uphold property rights and basic infrastructure, which libertarians would accept. But very importantly, the government has the capacity to make massive centralized investments in innovation, such as the internet, GPS, touchscreen technology. So the government, because it has the capacity through these tax raising powers to make and to finance and fund innovation, it can do things that businesses can't do. So a government is willing to take risks with some innovations. It's willing to take long-term investments. It's willing to fail because it can. Companies would be less likely to do this because they are in a competitive market economy. If they're not making a profit, they lose market share. Governments don't have this type of pressure, so they can make more long-term investments in innovations, which tech companies really depend on. Other things are like regulations to ensure markets function successfully. Also this, the government has the coercive capacity to rescue the economy in a crisis. So, during the 2008 financial crisis, it could use its considerable resources to bail out financial institutions. Today, you can see in France, the United Kingdom, the government is using its coercive capacity to pass legislation to stop people from moving around, also to protect jobs, to provide emergency funding to people. So these functions are based on the coercive capacity of the state, returning to what we said about Thomas Hobbes. Now, let's move on to the problem of libertarianism during a pandemic. So just remember the role of a government and some of the capacities that it has. The libertarian basics, before we speak about that, so this is just a reminder, is that the basic idea is people should be free. We should have protection over individual rights. So long as we don't harm other people, we can do whatever we want. In particular, we can do whatever we want with our body and labor. The government has no rights to tell us what to do with the money that we earn or how we use our body. Obligations only arise from consent. If I agree to, or if I sign a contract with you as a supplier and I fail to supply those things to you and you've paid me, that is a problem. But if there's no consent, there's no obligations to help other people. And minimal government. So the government does a few things like ensure security through having an army and a police force, ensuring that contracts are enforced. But other than that, there's not many things that the government is supposed to do. Now, a quick question for you guys is, which set of policies do you think the government should adopt during this pandemic? So with a libertarian, would you guys think that A or B is a better solution to this problem? So A is encourage people to engage in social distancing, but not require pubs to stay closed and for businesses to shut down. With regard to the economic hits like the negative impact caused by COVID-19, the governments will not commit to bailing out companies or workers who have lost businesses or jobs. Or B, would you think that the best government's approach is imposing measures which force social distancing, close shops, pubs and businesses, With regard to the economic hit caused by COVID-19, the government should provide support to businesses and workers who have lost income during this period. So just have a quick think about that. And also think about, what would a libertarian agree to? Would it be A or B? A libertarian would agree to A. It's about, you can encourage people to do it, but you can't force people to do things that they have not consented to. And also, you can't force people to, use taxpayers' money to bail out companies or workers who have lost jobs. Now, so libertarians would believe that even during this public health emergency, we should still allow free movement of people who are not knowingly carrying the risk. If you are knowingly carrying the risk, obviously you have to self-isolate, you have to self-quarantine, because if you go out to a pub and you know that you have the virus, then you are harming other people and you're violating the harm principle. Also, there should be no or limited government support for struggling businesses and individuals during the crisis, because I have, according to libertarianism, I have self-ownership over my labor. If I don't agree to pay for these things, I shouldn't have to as a citizen. Now, France's response is not consistent with libertarianism. So Macron has used, using Hobbes's terminology again. So Macron has used the coercive capacity of the state to control this crisis. He said we are at war. So he's used lockdown measures, closure of all non-essential shops. There's a decree and order prohibiting travel. And there's financial support for businesses and employees, so paid 70% of their salary. Now, what would be interesting, and this is kind of the unfortunate elements of not seeing you guys right now, but maybe we can talk about it at the very end of this class. Do you guys think that the French government has made the right decision? Or would you agree more with libertarianism? The government should not use its coercive capacity to force us to do things that we don't want to do. Now, one of the criticisms of libertarianism is that libertarian principles work well in theory. Like, it's a really elegant and beautiful theory, but in practice, it can lead to serious problems. So, for instance, if you do not have these type of measures, like the government doesn't impose these type of measures, you're likely, based on what has happened in other countries, you're likely to get a huge increase in infections. And this means that above this line, hospitals and the healthcare services do not have the capacity to help these people here. They don't have enough ventilators. They don't have enough intensive care units. They don't have enough beds. And this means that people will die. So libertarianism, it ignores outcomes, which, for example, utilitarians prioritize. And the basic criticism is it shouldn't just be about principles. We should also consider outcomes. That is morally intuitive to consider outcomes. Now, how does the outbreak of COVID-19 relate to Rawls's libertarianism? Sorry, let me correct that. Rawls's liberal egalitarianism. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this again. What you might want to do if you don't remember Rawls's liberal egalitarianism is pause the video, read through the basic ideas of this theory. One thing to think about with the coronavirus is that it probably deepens inequality. It makes inequality actually worsens its spread. And the reasons that this happens is that COVID-19 is particularly bad for the least advantaged. The underclass and the working class are especially vulnerable. Many of the people who are in low-income jobs, they don't work online. They have to go out and work, whether it's in factory work, whether it's in retail, whether it's, you have a job in the gig economy. You have to go out and that increases the risk of infection. Middle class jobs, you can tend to work from home, like I'm doing right now, but low income jobs don't really have this luxury. Obviously, if you have less money, you're less able to lose out on work because you have less savings. So it makes it particularly hard for families that have to go out and work. Um, as well, if you live in a country which has private health insurance, if you don't have public health care, like in the United States, you're less able to pay your medical bills than a person who's more wealthy. And really important is, according to research, if you are poor, you're more likely to have pre-existing conditions like diabetes and heart disease. These type of pre-existing conditions make it much riskier for you if you are infected with the coronavirus. So COVID-19 is likely to worsen inequality. So what kind of policies would a Rawlsian liberal egalitarian support for this current pandemic? So the governments, which, as we've said at the very beginning of this lecture, it can mobilize resources in crises like this, by using its tax-raising powers, its central authority. It should adopt measures to protect the least advantaged. So it should pass legislation that causes rent to freeze. So it forces landlords to not make their tenants, the people staying in their properties, pay for rent during this time. And the government should also use its capacity to pay the wages for those who cannot work. The United Kingdom and France have obviously already passed legislation to do this. So that's the lecture for this week. And that's it.